future. If anyone who would prefer not to be recorded, we would recommend that you turn off your video camera, which may be done by clicking on the stop video button in the bottom left corner of your Zoom screen, so that we can create a space for open discussion. The talking circle discussion after the talk will not be recorded. So yes, the recording has begun. And with that, Clarita, would you like to say a couple words about the tribal water security project before I introduce our guest speaker today?
Sure. I just want to say a couple words. So thank you, first of all, to everyone and to Michael for joining us today. So this webinar is part of our Tribal Water Security webinar series that we just launched last week. So Michael's our second speaker. We have a number of speakers lined up for the fall. So we're really excited about bringing these speakers to the webinar series to talk about how they are perceiving water insecurity and even water governance. The focus of these webinars is really to generate them for community members that we work with. And then, of course, though, we want to create an inviting and inclusive space. So we welcome everyone to come learn together with us and also have discussions. So without further ado, I want to pass it back to Claire so she can introduce our speaker today.
I'm glad to introduce today's speaker, Michael Vendiola. Michael is the Education Director for the Swinomish Indian Tribal Community and the editor of qyuuqs News. He is also the former Swinomish Communications Manager. I'm fortunate to have heard Michael share his wisdom before today, as Clarita has invited him to provide guest lectures in several of her classes. Attendees of last week's webinar were also fortunate to hear from Michael during our talking circle discussion. With that, I would like to turn our attention to Michael Vendiola. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'm really looking forward to your talk.
Haishka Siam. Walapo ti di ishits cholt adequate di ichu. Don Isatin Tista. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me in to share a few words. And I'll share my screen. I didn't want to make a correction. I probably messed up on when I submitted my corrections to my bio. I am the education director for the Swinomish tribe. I was the former communications director and the former qyuuqs News editor, but I no longer do that role, but still really involved with submitting educational articles to that our tribal newspaper. But thank you so much for that acknowledgement. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I just wanted to acknowledge Clarita and just say thank you for inviting me back, because this is my second presentation. So my first one went well enough to be asked back. The first one was at the 2021 Vine Deloria Symposium, in which I gave a similar talk about water harvesting. And that presentation was a little bit shorter time, so I appreciate being given more time today to say more of some of the thinking and ideology that my wife and I and our family are putting into this water harvesting that's kind of impacting our lifestyle and the way that we conduct ourselves in our relationship with Coast Salish territory and our traditions and our teachings. And I think that today that was one of my important messages, was really, some of this work may be new or unfamiliar. Water harvesting is not a traditional term that our Coast Salish people used, but the caretaking of this land and the, taking only what you need, or when you say something like, when the tide is out, the table is set, there are philosophies that are definitely in line with this idea of water harvesting, or using what you need, and not creating such a large impact on the place that you are a part of. And so there's a lot of cultural translation there. I'm speaking in English, but when we think about in our case, Kw'alaami Chasen, or where I come from, we speak Lushootseed. When we begin to kind of apply those cultural values, you realize that even though this is kind of a contemporary thing to do, it's really in line with a lot of what our philosophies are. So I'm glad to be back, and I'm just, what I've done is put together some slides. They're not even really slides, they're photos. So I'm hoping that I can share the photos with you that kind of tell the story of what we're doing in our home. And I'll also preface it that a lot of this work, some of the work, not a lot of it, is a result of the pandemic. And we have to think about, as Indigenous people, survival of many, I guess you could say, pandemic type occasions, interactions, genocidal approaches that have incurred Indigenous people. One of those things has been the ability to adapt and change and incorporate for survival. And so I did want to make that clear that a lot of this recent work that we've done with water recycling and other items that I'll talk about were the result of sheltering in place, being at our home. How do we look at food and water security in a different way if we really just had to stay at our house and not go anywhere? Really caused our family to think of things in a really different light when we're trying to avoid other people and not going to our regular food sources, or not being able to go swimming, or any of that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to say that at the onset. So I did do a traditional greeting in our Lushootseed language, but it is here written as well. And sometimes we do these language introductions, and we don't really fully explain or kind of put into context. But this is a sign that's here in my tribal community of Swinomish Indian Tribal Community, and it does say "Walapu ti diishits chof aruque diichu." So, and it roughly translates into "welcome, friends, and relations, each and every one of you." And so, this in a contextual way, when we think about land and place, this is a philosophy that our people carry, which is, this doesn't belong to me, or this place doesn't belong to us. We're caretakers of this place, and one of those ways that we caretake is that we welcome people in. If you're coming as an ally. So this is where we situate ourselves. This is considered the Salish Sea. It has always been that way for us Coast Salish people, but in more recent times, it actually was renamed the Salish Sea, and that kind of incorporates this whole huge watershed that flows into the Salish Sea, more familiar as Puget Sound, Strait of Georgia, Strait of Juan de Fuca, Vancouver Island here, and British Columbia, and then Washington State, all the way out to the Olympic Peninsula, south region of Olympia, Mount Rainier area. So this is like the Salish Sea and its tributaries. And I make my home here at Lummi, which is Lakdamish territory. And then I work, and I am an enrolled member of the Swinomish Indian Tribal Community, which is south of Lummi, and closely related. My great-great-grandfather was Haytiluk, and he was from Lummi, and his son moved from Lummi to Swinomish and married into the Williams family, and that's how I'm related to Lummi ancestrally, and then through the Williams family, that's how I am enrolled at Swinomish. One of the things I also wanted to mention today, normally in a normal non-pandemic year, we would be at the beginning of the big celebration of our tribal canoe journeys. And that tribal canoe journeys really encapsulates all of the Salish Sea, where we would have a host that would host all of the canoes from all these tribes around the Salish Sea, getting in their canoes, traveling hundreds of miles to, say, we came to Victoria. All the canoes from the south would come up to Victoria, all the canoes from the north would come to Victoria, and we would be at the end of that now. We would be now beginning our celebration if we're meeting up in Victoria. And that has a special place in my heart because, one, we haven't been able to do it the last 2 years. And two, when you're out on the water and it's completely quiet, no motor noises or distractions, you really develop a different relationship with, the water, and a respect for it, and interaction with it, and how you behave, and the kind of, it really gets you in tune, gets you to think about how you conduct yourself, because you realize that there's, something that's greater than you, more powerful, or something that you have reverence for. And that's a real, important thing that was a resurgence in the late 1980s of our traveling canoes and recreating our ancestral waterway traveling. And so now, it's sad at this time because we're not able to gather. So I wanted to acknowledge that because we have traveled all the way out here to Quinault, from Lummi. That's about 150 miles was that pull over 4 weeks. And so it's different than driving in a car or taking the bus or train. Pulling together, you learn how to work together. And so that further kind of captures that element of pulling together as a community, that you need to help each other. I wanted to share this. This is a map that I got. Somebody had posted online, and I downloaded it. But this is a map of water, a map that's really interesting. I mean, obviously it has Canadian and Mexican borders, but it's all of the water tributaries in what we now call the United States. But the thing that it makes me think of is really, our mindset of how Mother Earth is a living being. And this cannot, emphasize that anymore. And it's good to be aware, all of our Indigenous people, commonly named in their native language, water, people of the water, people of the salmon, it's oftentimes related to, the water that they live off. And of course, in more contemporary times, water is life, right? So we've heard that a lot more recently. So we do, my wife and I always speak in we because it's our family effort, do, water justice. We created this organization called the Red Line Salish Sea. And, we organize with local communities here in the Northwest and other sister ally program or organizations to really address the needs of whatever is impacting the Salish Sea, whether it's land, water, or air. And so this is just a group photo of us doing some good work. Really proud of that work to, kind of stand up as others have spoken, stand up for those that cannot speak. This is at the Lummi Swinomish grounds in Lummi, Washington, and we had done, on this day, we had done a huge beach cleanup that was covered 4 miles of cleanup on the Lummi Reservation. Okay, so I wanted to situate this presentation in the intergenerational. So as I introduce myself, I'm Danisitan, and my mother is Diane Vendiola, and one of the traditional names or ancestral names she carries is Danisia. And 2 years ago, we had a family naming, and she was recognized with that name as well as Hagalitsa. But I carry the male version of her name. So Danisitan is the male version of Danisia. So I'm the second generation of that name. And also in this picture is my granddaughter, Aviana, and obviously laughing at my grandmother. And she carries the name of Seat Kasta'ab. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but in our work that we're doing, red line, we borrowed as a term from the fight for climate justice and the Paris Agreement, where Indigenous folks were drawing the red line and went to France to attempt to hold the Paris Accord accountable for including and recognizing Indigenous communities as part of that agreement. This is another article that was created by salishsea.org, and it's basically articles that proclaim protection of the Salish Sea, and kind of the really important stuff right here. 8 things that are not allowed in the Salish Sea Bioregional Marine Sanctuary: open net pen fishing, which is basically fish farms, trophy hunting, genetically modified organisms, and a bunch of other really large words that I don't understand or can't pronounce. Mega tanker trafficking, really centered on protecting the Coast Salish or the Salish Sea. So I wanted to share this because, again, kind of looking at a really wide lens right now and moving towards why I'm here to present. So this is my great-great-grandfather, Haytaluk, and as I mentioned, he came from Lummi, and he was someone that was a person who protected our songs and dances and ceremonies at a time when they were outlawed and persecuted. And he is a part of, in the English name, he carried Edward Hilaire. And it's important for us to acknowledge our lineage. And so, for him, this is, he stands as one of our pillars of our family. And it goes all the way down to my granddaughter, who's the newest generation. And she carries, as I mentioned, the name Seat Kasta'ab, and the literal translation is her big hope. And the name is a place-based name. And so here on the Swinomish Indian Reservation, there's an island called Hope Island, but its traditional name is Kasta'ab. And so when we're being given our names, Seat, which is the female identifier, was added to Kasta'ab, and that became her ancestral name. And what that does is it places her into this context of always being connected to the land. So that's that's a big intention, that she will always be connected to this place of the world and be a caretaker, and all those things. As a young person, she doesn't understand, but when she gets older, she'll realize this is a place that she's responsible for. So we're trying to teach her as much as we can, me and my wife as grandparents. And that's kind of now getting into why we do water harvesting. It helps us, but it benefits her. It allows her to understand the world in a different way. And so as we were during the pandemic, we had a huge blackberry overgrowth in our backyard, and our son came last year and cleared it all out. And around the same time, I learned about this way of life from Japan called forest bathing. And forest bathing is a meditation process that some Japanese people use to go out into the wilderness and use the forest as a way to center their minds and meditate. And so we cleared out this blackberry bush, and we all of a sudden had access to this forest, our forest that's behind our house. It's not even our property, but it's a big giant forest back there. And this is one of the trees or set of trees we discovered. And we're pretty sure that somebody did this to the tree, but they braided the trees together. And so it's one of the first things that when we went out there and we're practicing this idea of forest bathing, we're looking at what's out there. And so she was like, Sapa. Sapa is grandpa in the shoot seed. She calls me Sapa Lolo. Sapa is the shoot seed for grandpa, and Lolo is Tagalog, Filipino for grandpa. So she calls me Grandpa. Anyway, she said, look at this tree. And so then I had to take the picture from, really her point of view. The other thing, like we're talking about food security, water security, she's learning about gardening, and again, from the pandemic, being fearful of going into the grocery store, we had to really limit our abilities to come into contact with people. And that meant strongly thinking about gardening, which we'd had gardens in the past, but not as hardcore as survival gardening, really looking at, we may need this food to eat if we don't have access to food. And so rolled into that is teaching her how to, do that, be familiar with it, and us as a learning process, learning along with her. So she embraced it fully. It kind of looks like she's fallen over, but in reality, she's leaning over to hug the onions. She's hugging the onions. And that's how she manifested. I remember this day, this was not this year, but last year, I was saying, take care of the onions, let's take care of the onions. And you could see in part of the picture that these cabbages here are being watered. But when I said, take care of the onions, that's what she did. She went and she started hugging all the plants. And they turned out really great. This is this year. And so we took, one of our friends had a bunch of raspberry starts that had taken over the part of their yard. So they dug them up and were giving them out. And so they gave us some. And we went out as far as we could on this, like I said, this land that doesn't belong to us, but we put these raspberries out there and planted them, and hoping they take off. And this is right after we planted them. She gave them all a big hug. So that's and now they have raspberries now. So more garden beds and plants. These are strawberries coming in. This is showing the growth of them. Learning how to water plants. We did this program with the community, so not just sustaining ourselves during the pandemic. These are grow baskets that we distributed out to the community for anyone else who was interested in learning how to garden and wanted to get started on it. So that was really cool project. We just basically, actually my wife Michelle had applied for a grant to buy supplies. And so we bought all these gardening supplies, and then had a socially distanced distribution for all these plants and supplies. And then my son was also getting involved, and he doesn't live with us, but he took a really big interest when we cleared out all these blackberry bushes. He was looking at forest gardens, which is a traditional way that Indigenous people created essentially gardens made out of Indigenous plants. So once we got rid of all these blackberry bushes, he started putting in all these Indigenous plants. And we just started looking up what are all the Indigenous plants and not knowing all of them. And they're all taken off. They're all used to it. They love, they love this area. They love the Northwest. And we're talking about like camas and salal and cedar tree, additional cedar trees, crab apples, blueberry, not blueberries. I can't remember. I think it's salal. Well, one of those that makes another berry. We're excited about. Ironwood. This is a picture of our ironwood, which is coming from Salish territory. You'll understand that this has a significant amount of uses, one of which is fish sticks. If you ever had traditional barbecued fish, salmon from Coast Salish territory, most likely were cooked on fish sticks that come from this plant. It's really hard wood. And here's our blueberries. Here's our attempt at corn. These are some trellises that are new for our garden this year. Okay, so for the presentation, I was trying to think about what's the best way to explain water harvesting, which is the main topic. So I'm finally getting to it. Mousetrap. Only my friends from the 1900s will understand mousetrap. But mousetrap is basically you build a contraption and the marble rolls down and then tries to capture the mouse. That's the same thing for water harvesting. We're trying to capture all the water and get it into a trap or a container. And so one of the things is having a container. And so fortunately our local, I don't even know what kind of store, I'm not a farmer or anything like that. I don't, but they had these at our farming store that were like $45 a barrel. And you have to be really careful. I mean, you look at this and you think, oh, those are the same barrels, but they're not really. And I didn't really notice it until I started trying to construct my water harvesting system. And then I realized that this barrel has a smaller mouth than this one, and it changed everything because I wasn't able to do exactly the same thing on both of them. These barrels come from you have to be careful what kind of barrels you get. They have to be safe for water, water storage, and these ones for food, and that didn't have chemicals in them, that you don't get poisoned from any chemicals that were in here. These were basically they came from Italy and they stored olives in them. And so after they use them for olives, then they sell them at these farm stores. And here is our grand water harvesting barrel. And YouTubes, you got to get on YouTube. There's great explanations on YouTube's on how to construct this. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos to figure out where to put these holes and how to build a washout drain and how to put in the spigot. And but I got this all put together, and then it only took one rainfall to fill up this barrel. And so this is a washout. So this is supposed to be like all the initial gunk that comes off the roof that you really don't want, in your garden, or, we're not drinking this. This isn't potable water, but basically just to kind of clear out all the yucky stuff, dirt or whatever that's on the roof. It's supposed to go in here. And then once it fills up to here, it starts filling up the barrel. And then, so in one rainfall, it filled up this barrel. And so when it gets past the fill point, it starts coming out of this hose on the left side here, and it drains out back down to the drain. So it was really a big success right at the beginning. I was so excited. My barrel's full of water. We have all this water now. And I bought 2 of them, but I didn't set the other one up because, as I mentioned, they weren't the same size. So I wasn't able to use the same, wasn't able to put it together the same way. And there's some things I put in here, like they said put a nice base here, just so that it doesn't tip over, or it's pretty heavy. So you want to have that weight distributed as much as possible. And what I learned since the last time I presented was it's worth it to really use quality pieces. So basically I learned from YouTube, and they said, oh, you need this 1/2-inch pipe, and you need some washers. And so I went to the hardware store, and I got 1/2-inch pipe, and I got a spigot. But the reality, in hindsight, you want to really have high quality equipment, because I didn't get the right washers. So it held for 1 or 2 rains, and then it started leaking. And the spigot is plastic. It's made out of plastic. So it's now starting to leak, just because it's just not very good quality. And the piping is I don't know what pretty sure it's not for water. It's for vacuum hose or something. I don't know. So in hindsight, I want to go back and really try to study, or ask somebody there for water type hose. And also in hindsight, although this works really well, this is this kind of separates the water from the downspout, and you could put 2 hoses here. Only have one water barrel, so I'm using one side. And then anything that overflows this this hose, basically, if it gets if the pressure is too much, it fills up this cup, and then it diverts it back into the downspout. But the reality is it was way overwhelmed. Like I said, it filled it up really quickly. So next time I put one of these in, I probably won't even buy one of these. I'll just buy additional downspout piping and pipe it directly to my washout, because this really isn't a necessary thing. It's helpful to try to understand conceptually how water harvesting works, and it does divert it really well, but it's not necessary if you want just a basic understanding of how to harvest water. There's a close-up of my washout with my plastic fittings, and none of this is glued. It's all just pushed on there. There's all kinds of stuff that needs improvement. I want to raise this. I want to actually stand these blocks on their end and raise the water tube higher, or the water barrel higher. One, because I can't get access to this spigot. Like if I wanted to put a bucket under there, I can't do that. The only thing I can do is just have this hose. So it kind of limits the way I can use that water that's in there. And two, I want to raise it because as you raise the height of the water, it increases the water pressure that comes out of this hose. And so this hose goes out to, well, here's a video. It goes out, this is the trial run. This is the first time I tried that out of that rain barrel. So there's some camas right there. Some cedar that's turned into wood chips. Sage, an avi. And up to the rain barrel. Okay. So this is the roof that we're getting this water off of, and we were, like I said, it was over, that one barrel was easily overwhelmed with all the water coming off here, and I'm not even pulling it off the back side. It's only coming off the front side. But as you can see, there's a lot of moss, and this roof is really old. So we're now redoing this roof right now as we speak, actually. So the downside of it is that, we're going to get a new roof. That's a real plus. But the downside is that we can't harvest water off of that for like 3 years because of the chemicals and the runoff off those the shingles. So now we have to figure out another way to harvest water. And in the long, like talking about future plans, we're going to put larger water barrels that are going to be in this area where there's no window or anything. I'm going to build a slant on this storage container, and that is going to be eventually, hopefully it'll be solar panels, but it will have a slant on it that will be the water harvesting station, and we'll start getting water off of the top of this storage container. And this is a picture of the type of, because our barrels got overwhelmed so quickly, we want to just have more storage ability to hold that water and be able to utilize it for more than just the garden, and really reuse the water that's coming down. So that's about it. I hope it's, I tried to make it user friendly. Like, I think part of the issue is that folks, have a limited, in our tribal communities, a limited understanding of how this might work. And I wanted to say that, it didn't take very long to try to understand how it works and understand the benefits of doing it. All this water isn't running into the storm drains, and it's not collecting anywhere on our property and flooding the yard or anything like that. So there's a lot of benefits that go along with it, on top of the water security of, like, potentially, if our Lummi water and sewer goes down, we want to have access water, in some sort. So hopefully that message kind of came across, as well as the connection to the culture and identity of our Coast Salish responsibilities. And that's it. I think appreciate the time again to share this, and I hope it's useful for anyone who watches this.
Thank you so much, Michael. So as we segue into our discussion and talking circle here, what I want to say to those of you who are tuning in on our YouTube channel, the Tribal Water Security YouTube channel, is that we'll be holding these webinars for the rest of the fall and hopefully next winter. So please sign up to our water security listserv, and also you can email Claire McDonald or myself at the University of Washington if you have any questions. So as we prepare for our discussion, we're going to go ahead and pause our recording so that we can have an open and free conversation. And we hope that you'll join us in the future. So stopping the recording now.